The morning sun filtered weakly through the cracked windows of Maplewood High School, a public school on the edge of a bustling city. The building, with its peeling paint and creaking floors, stood as a quiet witness to the struggles of its students, many of them from working-class families. But for Amara Lewis, a 16-year-old sophomore, even entering those doors each day felt like climbing a mountain. Amara came from the poorest neighborhood in town, a place many of her classmates whispered about with pity or disdain. Her shoes were scuffed, her uniform faded, and her backpack held together with safety pins. But behind those tired eyes and worn clothes lay a quiet determination. She loved books, loved learning, and dreamed of becoming a scientist one day. Unfortunately, not everyone could see past her appearance. In the middle of second period, Amara sat at the back of Mr. Thompson's English literature class. He was a seasoned teacher, known for his sharp tongue and impatient demeanor. He often singled out students he deemed lazy or hopeless, and Amara, with her shabby notebooks and quiet demeanor, was his favorite target. That day, Mr. Thompson paced across the classroom floor, tapping a stack of essays against his hand. His voice carried the confidence of someone who never expected to be questioned. "Class," he began, adjusting his glasses, "I've reviewed your essays on Shakespeare's Hamlet. Some of you showed promise, but others," he paused for dramatic effect, his eyes narrowing as they scanned the rows of desks, "need to understand that education isn't charity. It requires effort, discipline, intelligence." He stopped abruptly in front of Amara's desk. The room grew tense. Everyone knew what was coming. Holding up a paper with red marks slashed across it, Mr. Thompson sneered. "Take Amara, for instance. Do you know what she wrote? A mess of sentences with barely any structure. I wonder if she even read the play." The class shifted uncomfortably. A few students chuckled nervously, while others stared at their desks, unwilling to meet Amara's eyes. Mr. Thompson wasn't finished. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he continued. "Perhaps I'm expecting too much. After all, some people are born for greatness, and others," he let the sentence dangle, casting a pointed glance at Amara's worn shoes, "well, they're better off preparing for a life outside of academia." A sharp silence followed. Amara felt her face burn. She wanted to vanish into the cracked linoleum beneath her feet, but she held her gaze steady, refusing to let the tears welling in her eyes fall. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice barely audible, "I did read the play. Twice." The room stilled. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Twice? Then you wasted your time, because this," he waved the essay dismissively, "proves otherwise." He tossed the paper onto her desk, the thud louder than it should have been. The humiliation cut deep. To have her effort dismissed in front of her peers was more than embarrassing. It was crushing. Amara clenched her fists under the desk, her nails digging into her palms. She refused to let him see her cry. The students whispered among themselves. Some felt sympathy, others relished the drama. But one thing was clear. The divide between teacher and student had never been starker. Later, in a hallway, Amara overheard a group of classmates whispering. "Did you hear what Thompson said? She'll never pass finals. Poor thing should just quit." Their laughter echoed, but inside Amara's chest, something else stirred. Shame, yes, but also resolve. She walked home that day with her head down, the weight of her classmates' whispers heavy on her shoulders. But when she reached the tiny apartment she shared with her mother, she pulled out her books and spread them across the kitchen table. Her mother, exhausted from a double shift at the diner, smiled weakly and kissed her forehead. "Don't let them break you, baby," she whispered. "You're meant for more." And in that moment, Amara made a silent promise. They could mock her clothes. They could mock her voice. They could even mock her essays. But when finals came, she would show them who she really was. The nights in Amara's neighborhood were restless. Sirens wailed in the distance, dogs barked, and the hum of city life never truly faded. But in the small, dimly lit apartment she shared with her mother, Amara created her own sanctuary at the kitchen table. Her notebooks, though worn and patched with tape, were spread neatly before her. A second-hand dictionary, its cover frayed, rested open at her side. A single lamp cast a pale glow across the pages. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Every night, after finishing her chores and helping her mother tidy up, Amara would sit down to study. The sting of Mr. Thompson's words still echoed in her mind, but instead of breaking her, they fueled her. His sneer, his cruel insinuation that she was unfit for academia, replayed again and again. Each time, it ignited a fire within her. "I'll prove him wrong," she whispered to herself. But the road ahead wasn't easy. Amara didn't have the luxury of private tutors or new textbooks. Many of her classmates carried shiny tablets and highlighters in bright colors, while she made do with borrowed library books and notes scribbled in pencil. Her school uniform, washed so often it had faded to a dull gray, seemed like another reminder of the gap between her and the others. Still, she pressed on. At school, the whispers continued. Some classmates mocked her openly. "Hey, Amara, maybe you should try reading Hamlet a third time," one boy joked. Another chimed in, "Don't bother, she'll still fail." Their laughter followed her down the hallway. Amara didn't respond. She learned to let their words slide off her like rain. What they couldn't see was that every insult added fuel to her resolve. There were moments of doubt, though, nights when exhaustion made her eyes heavy and her pen slip from her fingers. On those nights, she'd look at the photo taped to the refrigerator door. Her late father, smiling in his mechanic's uniform, standing proudly beside the car he once restored. He had always told her, "Brains build bridges, Amara. They take you where no one else thinks you belong." Remembering his words, she would sit up straighter, wipe her eyes, and keep going. Her mother, though weary from long shifts at the diner, noticed her daughter's determination. Sometimes, she would brew a cup of tea and place it beside Amara's books. "You're going to be someone they can't ignore," she said softly. Slowly, Amara began to see progress. Concepts that once confused her started to make sense. She practiced essay outlines, rewrote passages, and memorized key quotes from Shakespeare and other texts. She wasn't just preparing for an exam. She was preparing to prove her worth. But it wasn't all quiet determination. One afternoon, while Amara stayed behind in the library, she stumbled upon a stack of old academic journals. Intrigued, she began reading. The language was difficult, filled with words she didn't fully understand, but she pushed through. To her surprise, she found herself not only understanding, but connecting themes across different works. She started jotting notes that wove together literature, history, and even her own life experiences. Her essays transformed. No longer were they simple responses. They became arguments, layered with insight and passion. Still, Mr. Thompson wasn't impressed. One day, when she answered a complex question in class, his lip curled in disdain. "Memorization is easy. Original thought is harder, Amara. Try not to confuse the two." The class chuckled, but this time, Amara didn't shrink. She looked him directly in the eye. "I wasn't memorizing, sir. I was analyzing." The silence that followed was sharp. Some students shifted uncomfortably. Others smirked, waiting for Mr. Thompson's rebuttal. But for once, he didn't respond. He simply moved on, his jaw tight. That night, Amara wrote in her journal, "For the first time, I felt like I belonged." As finals approached, the tension grew. Students whispered anxiously about grades, while teachers reminded them of the stakes. For Amara, the weight was heavier than for most. She wasn't just fighting for a grade. She was fighting for dignity. On the eve of the exam, Amara sat by the window, the glow of the city casting faint shadows on her face. She whispered a quiet prayer, not for luck, but for the strength to show her truth. When she finally closed her notebook and laid her head down, she dreamed not of failure, but of standing tall in a room where no one could mock her again. And deep inside, she knew tomorrow was the day everything would change. The morning of the final exam dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself carried the weight of what was about to unfold. Rain tapped softly on the window pane as Amara dressed carefully in her faded uniform. Her mother handed her a piece of bread wrapped in napkin. Breakfast was simple, but her mother's eyes carried something stronger than food: faith. "You've already won, my daughter," her mother said, kissing her forehead. "Today, you just show them what I already know." Amara clutched those words close as she made her way to school. Each step felt like part of a long march, not just to an exam, but to something greater, vindication. The exam hall was a cavernous space, rows of desks stretching endlessly beneath fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. Teachers shuffled papers, their stern faces offering no comfort. Students fidgeted nervously, flipping through last-minute notes. Amara took her seat near the back, aware of the sideways glances she received. Some smirked, others whispered, but she kept her gaze fixed forward. Then came the heavy sound of shoes echoing across the hall. Mr. Thompson entered, carrying a stack of test booklets. His presence was commanding, his sharp eyes sweeping the room like a general before battle. When his gaze lingered on Amara, his expression tightened, still doubtful, still dismissive. "Let's begin," he said curtly. The booklets were passed down the rows, and when one landed on Amara's desk, her hands trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, whispering silently, "This is it." The first question was an essay prompt. Discuss the theme of justice in Shakespeare's works, drawing parallels to modern society. Amara's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. She had prepared for this. Nights spent reading those old journals, afternoons tracing connections between literature and real-world struggles. It had all led here. She gripped her pen and began to write. Words flowed as though they had been waiting for this moment, weaving Shakespeare's characters with the injustices she had witnessed in her own neighborhood. She wrote about Hamlet's hesitation, Othello's vulnerability, and the universal struggle of those silenced by prejudice. Her essay wasn't just an answer. It was a voice strong and unyielding. As the minutes passed, she tackled each section with the same intensity. Analysis, argument, evidence, her pen barely left the page. Around her, other students sighed or stared blankly at their papers. But Amara pressed on, every stroke of ink cutting through doubt. Halfway through the exam, she felt a presence near her desk. Looking up, she saw Mr. Thompson standing over her, his sharp eyes scanning her paper. For a moment, his brow furrowed, as though trying to reconcile what he was reading with the girl he had mocked. He lingered longer than with anyone else, his expression unreadable. Finally, he moved on without a word, but Amara caught the brief flicker of something in his face. Was it surprise? As the final minutes ticked away, Amara reviewed her work. Her fingers were cramped, her wrist ached, but her heart felt steady. She had left everything she had on those pages. When the bell rang, signaling the end, the room erupted in sighs and shuffling chairs. Students compared answers, debated, complained. Amara, however, sat quietly for a moment longer. She closed her booklet gently, as though sealing her determination inside it. Walking to the front, she handed in her paper. Mr. Thompson accepted it without looking up, but his grip on the booklet was firm, almost reluctant. For a brief second, their eyes met. His gaze was no longer mocking. It was searching, unsettled. Amara didn't flinch. She simply nodded politely and walked out. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight peeked timidly through the clouds. Amara tilted her head upward, letting the warmth brush her skin. For the first time in a long while, she felt lighter. Not because she knew the results, but because she knew she had faced the moment with everything she had. Back home, her mother greeted her anxiously. "How was it?" Amara smiled, exhaustion in her eyes, but fire in her voice. "I think I gave them something they won't forget." Her mother pulled her into an embrace, whispering, "Then no matter the grade, you've already succeeded." But deep down, Amara sensed this was more than just a personal victory. Something about the way Mr. Thompson had looked at her suggested the story was far from over. And she was right. The shockwave her exam would unleash was only beginning. The days following the exam crawled by like an endless march. Every student at the academy felt the tension in the air. Whispered speculations filled the hallways. Who had passed? Who had failed? Who might emerge as the year's best? Amara carried herself with quiet composure. though deep inside, her heart battled between hope and fear. She remembered every line she had written, every argument she had crafted. But the ghost of Mr. Thompson's doubts haunted her. What if he dismisses my work like he always dismissed me? Her mother tried to comfort her. You've done your part, Amara. The rest is in God's hands. But Amara knew it wasn't just in God's hands. It was also in Mr. Thompson's. Finally, the day arrived. Students gathered in the assembly hall, buzzing like restless bees. At the front, the headmistress stood with the teachers, their expressions serious, clutching the results in manila envelopes. Amara sat in the middle row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel eyes on her, some mocking, some curious. For weeks, she had been the subject of speculation. Would the maid's daughter even pass? What was she doing in this academy anyway? Then the headmistress cleared her throat. Silence fell like a curtain. Students, she began, her voice firm but calm. Today we honor academic excellence. These exams were not just a test of knowledge, but of discipline, perseverance, and character. Her words seemed to slice through the tension. Amara felt her chest tighten as she waited. The first names were called, those who had performed well, but not exceptionally. Applause followed each announcement, though faint murmurs still carried through the crowd. Then came the moment that no one had anticipated. The highest score in this year's literature examination, the headmistress announced, her eyes scanning the hall, goes to Amara Johnson. The hall fell silent. For a moment, it was as though no one breathed. Students blinked in disbelief. Teachers exchanged glances, and a wave of shock rippled across the room. Amara froze, her mind struggling to process the words. Did she really say my name? Yes. The headmistress repeated firmly, Amara Johnson. Not only did she achieve the top score, but her essay was described by the examiner as brilliant, original, and profoundly insightful. The silence broke into a roar of gasps and whispers. Some students looked outraged, others bewildered. A few clapped hesitantly. Amara rose slowly to her feet, her legs trembling. She walked toward the stage, every step echoing like thunder in her ears. Standing at the front, she accepted her certificate with shaky hands. She turned to face the crowd, and for the first time, she saw their disbelief transform into something else. Respect, however reluctant. But it was Mr. Thompson's face that caught her attention. He sat stiffly at the side of the stage, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. For weeks, he had mocked her, dismissed her, belittled her efforts. Now, he was forced to watch as she claimed the very honor he had assumed belonged to his favorite students. Their eyes locked for a brief second. His pride was a fortress, but there was no mistaking the crack that now ran through it. After the ceremony, the murmurs continued in the courtyard. Some still whispered that the results must have been a mistake. Others shook their heads, saying no. I saw her paper. It was flawless. A group of students approached her cautiously. One of them, a boy who had often teased her, muttered awkwardly, Congrats, Amara. Guess we were wrong about you. She smiled politely, but said nothing. She didn't need their validation. At home, her mother wept with pride, clutching her tightly. You've proven them wrong, Amara. You've shown them who you are. But Amara knew it wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right, that she was capable, worthy, brilliant. That evening, Mr. Thompson knocked on her classroom door as she packed her books. The room was empty, the echoes of the day still lingering. He stood in the doorway, his usual arrogance muted. Amara, he began, his voice low, I read your essay again. It surprised me. She looked at him steadily, waiting. You've written something remarkable, he admitted, though the words seemed to burn his pride. I may have underestimated you. Amara held his gaze, her expression calm. You didn't underestimate me, sir. You just never saw me. For a moment, silence hung between them. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came. Finally, he gave a small nod and left. Amara watched him go, her heart steady. This wasn't about an apology. She didn't need one. The results had spoken louder than any words. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about what had happened. The whispers, the gasps, the shocked faces, All of it was proof that sometimes truth strikes hardest when no one expects it. And though she had won the top score, Amara knew this was only the beginning. The real test wasn't the exam. It was the life ahead of her. The morning after the announcement, Pinecrest Academy felt like a different place. The whispers in the hallways had changed from mocking sneers to hushed awe. Students who once turned their backs on Amara now eyed her with curiosity, as though trying to reconcile the maid's daughter they had ridiculed with the scholar who had risen above them all. But Amara didn't let their sudden shift in behavior sway her. She had learned something vital, that people's opinions were as fragile as glass, easily shattered by truth. What mattered was the belief she had carried all along, even when no one else saw it. Her mother, still overwhelmed with pride, carried Amara's certificate around like a priceless jewel. Neighbors came by to congratulate her, saying things like, "Your daughter has made history," and "She's proof that talent doesn't wear a uniform." For Lillian Johnson, it was more than just her daughter's success. It was vindication for the nights she had worked double shifts, the mornings she had packed lunches with tired hands, the sacrifices she had made so that Amara could sit in those classrooms, even if others thought she didn't belong. "Every time they mock you," Lillian whispered to her daughter, "I prayed that one day God would silence them." And he did. Amara hugged her mother tightly. "No, Mama, we did." But beyond the walls of her home, not everyone celebrated. In the staff room, murmurs continued. Some teachers grudgingly admitted Amara's brilliance. Others, like Mr. Thompson, struggled with what it meant to have been so wrong. The headmistress called Amara into her office one afternoon. She spoke with a warmth rarely seen from her before. "Amara, you have not only excelled academically, but you've taught this school something it desperately needed to learn." Amara tilted her head, curious. That worth cannot be measured by status, by uniforms, or by the wealth of one's parents. You've reminded us all why education exists in the first place, to uncover potential, not to cage it. Amara left that meeting with her heart full. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who would come after her, every child mocked for being less than, every student doubted because of where they came from. In the weeks that followed, the story of Amara's triumph began to spread beyond the academy. A local newspaper picked it up, publishing a feature titled "The Maid's Daughter Who Topped the Academy." Soon, the story traveled further, shared on blogs and social media, inspiring thousands. Strangers sent letters to Amara, some from students who said they too had been mocked for being poor, for being different, for daring to dream bigger than the world told them they could. "Your story gave me courage," one letter read. Amara realized then that her victory wasn't just personal. It was communal. Her success became a mirror reflecting the struggles of countless others who had been silenced by prejudice, and showing them that silence could be broken. As for Mr. Thompson, though he never publicly apologized, his teaching began to change. He became more cautious with his words, less quick to dismiss students he once would have ignored. Pride still lingered in his tone, but the crack Amara had left in his certainty remained, a reminder that brilliance could come from places he least expected. One afternoon, Amara overheard him telling another teacher, "Sometimes the best students are the ones we fail to see." She didn't smile, but inside, she knew she had left her mark. Years later, when Amara walked across the stage at her university graduation, she thought back to that moment in Pinecrest Academy. The humiliation, the whispers, the certificate in her hands, and her mother's tears of joy. She realized that life's greatest tests are not written on paper, but in how one responds to doubt, prejudice, and adversity. And she had passed. The world remembered her not as the maid's daughter, but as the young woman who refused to be defined by others' limitations. Her story became a parable, repeated in classrooms, churches, and households. Never underestimate the overlooked. Sometimes, the very ones dismissed by society carry the brilliance that will change it. Amara knew her journey had only begun, but as she moved forward, she carried one unshakable truth within her, that the strength to rise above isn't given. It's forged in the fire of adversity. And in rising, she had shown everyone what true pride looked like.